We're now ready for a panel tour. You guys, I see y'all actually came closer together. It's so hard for me as a videographer and an artist. Like now, my brain is like left tizzling because everybody went this way, and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know where to look no more. I could see y'all for a little bit, but now I'm like, everybody's over here. So, are y'all okay together? Y'all doing all right? Cool. All right. Just remember, no talking, passing notes, chewing gum. Just pay attention. We have another amazing panel for you. I would actually say, growing up in Panama City, Florida, around the Navy hostel system, and my father working with the Navy for 20 plus years and being around the Pentagon and the things that I saw, this is actually very exciting for me. This is like my inner nerd moments because I remember the first time getting to see all this stuff with my dad and then getting to grow up and execute a $60 million contract with cybersecurity for one of the ships in Panama City was one of the highlights of working with my father. He's still alive, by the way. He's not dead. But maritime defense is very, very big in St. Pete. And today we wanted to bring some of our panelists up. So as you can see, it's 20 plus organizations operating inside a hub of Port of St. Pete. The average salary is $91,000, and the hub is currently full occupancy, no space. But today we have some of the specialists, and we're going to talk about this because this is a very big part of our economy here. And we have not Michael Anderson, I have.
Well, you got 3 people on your list and 4 sitting here, so I'll address that at the front, dude. Do you want us to introduce ourselves?
I will take that.
Just a lifeline. Justin, you want to help first, man?
Yeah, I'm the ghost that doesn't exist up there.
Just the casual, but 17 minutes ago, and I was like, we didn't know. Where's our we? We have to get stuff at a certain time. If y'all can't see, this is where you need to facilitate your companies. This is how you stay on task. So they don't play at collaborative labs. We had to turn this in 14 days ago. So if you came in 13 days, it's too late. Go ahead, but
To be honest, it is on me. I was in Europe for 2 weeks, doing running of the bulls.
oh, a little soft flex here.
Little flex, it's sort of. But I'm a sales consultant at Hattie, and Hattie is a 3D printing world builder that uses polymer composites and AI to create things that are the size of a shoebox up to the size of a 50-foot boat. Justin Gray.
Okay. Next.
My name is Ruli Schultz. I work for Florida Makes. I'm the Gulf Coast Regional Director. So we get together and we help businesses, manufacturers, maritime technology, be it build, supply chain management, look at the workforce development, look to see where there's grants that we can help the businesses grow. And so that's really an important piece, right? To grow your business, you're going to need some grants, you're going to need some help, you're going to need some supply chain. So that's what we do.
I am Scott Pickens, and it says Northeastern University, which is kind of true. I actually work for the Defense Industrial Base Institute, which is an applied research institute affiliated to Northeastern University. So we have major contracts with particularly the Navy, but all the different parts of the Department of War now. And our job is to try to figure out how to get industry and academia and government to all work together for a change to try to improve and restore our industrial base for defense. Because right now it's a third of the size it was in the 1990s, and we're starting to have a lot of problems because of that. So that's where we're focused. I live in St. Pete, and very, very interested. I work with all these guys. I work with Allison. We got tremendous assets in this area. And I would agree with some of the earlier comments. We see it from a national perspective. St. Pete is barely on the map. But the good news is that, a year and a half ago, the Department of the Navy didn't really know we existed. That has changed dramatically now. And that's a very good first step and a very good sign.
I'm Michael Anderson. The label is accurate, but I think it just needs like a fan of parenthesis because I'm a big fan of what Hattie and the team do. But I'm the co-founder. Yeah, of course. But I'm the co-founder and CEO of Seagate Space. We're a company that's developing maritime infrastructure for the space industry, and starting with a offshore launch platform that can launch a small rocket at sea. We're based at the Arc Innovation Center here in St. Pete. We moved in there April 2025 after starting the company January 2025. We have folks across the state in Jacksonville as well as other cities in Florida, but based here. And we've also received both private funding from VCs and angel investors here in the state and outside of the state, as well as federal and state government support. So looking forward to talking about all the options there.
All right. So hands up if you believe Tampa Bay is positioned to win a defense tech, or even if you knew we had this. Actually, I'm gonna switch it up. I never even knew that defense tech was a thing in St. Pete. Okay. So do you think we're positioned to win for that? Okay, you still holding your hands up. So we mentioned this before, the Hub 2 referendum. Could you guys tell me, for record, you got 10 seconds to answer this. When do we vote on this? November 21st? November 3rd? Ah, November 3rd. So that's going to be 15 weeks from today. So just remember that. So just the days you're here, the biggest thing about our panels is we call them interactive panel workshops. We pull data in real time so that we stay up to date with the issues that are going on. So this is definitely something of heightened importance, and it matters to everybody that's up here on this stage. So make sure you get out to vote. For each panelist, just want to have a quick 60-second response to kind of warm everything up. What is the single assumption about the defense tech boom that is making right now that would not survive reality? Input. 60 seconds.
I think for me, you see a lot of venture investment coming in with the assumption that contracts are going to be awarded without any disconnects or without any drama. And so there's actually lawsuits ongoing right now where companies that have raised hundreds of millions of private funding did not receive the contract that they anticipated to receive. And so now you're looking at a situation where there's lawsuits that are basically flowing venture dollars into suing what the ideal customer would be for that company, and it's also going to hold up the procurement in general because it's going to be challenged in court. So I think the assumption that the government is a safe bet is something that needs to be challenged. That the government, as your customer, is a safe business strategy, I think is something that needs to be challenged. That doesn't mean to say that the government is an important part of a portfolio. But I think just catering for a single government need or even a single government contract vehicle with hundreds of millions of dollars coming into it before that contract's even active, that's something that we're going to see some hard lessons that are around.
Absolutely.
I absolutely agree with that. That is a major assumption that's starting to become problematic. So I'll pick another one. One of the things that we see all the time is company after company that says, even if there is defense tech going on around here, even if there's all of a sudden money for it, either private or government or both, the whole process is just too hard. We don't think we can. We don't think we want to be in that space. We don't think you can be in that space. We don't understand that space. And everybody's heard the war stories about the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Register, and those are all real, by the way, the war stories, and they're horrible. I've been dealing with that for 40 years. But the truth of the matter is that the way that the Department of War in particular is adjusting their whole approach to acquisition, they are making it a little bit more flexible to participate. And they're moving down that path. It's not, they don't have all the wrinkles worked out yet, like Lake was just talking about. But it is a real thing that almost anybody now can participate. You don't have to be a prime contractor to benefit from everything that's going to be happening in this area. There are always going to be a handful of prime contractors, but then there are subs to that. And then there are people that supply the subs and people that supply them, which is the very definition of supply chain. It doesn't even have to necessarily mean you're a tech company. There's opportunities to, provide paper clips, etc. So just because you don't think you're a defense company does not mean that you can't play in this space and benefit from everything that's about to happen in this region.
Really? Sorry, go ahead. Just on a rule.
I appreciate it. I just wanted to jump on both Michael and Scott's points in the fact that on one hand, at least in the USV space or unmanned surface vessel space, that we do a lot of work for these government cons. You have a lot of these companies that are going after the one contract. There will be winners and there will be losers. And there is VC money being thrown at all of them. And it's basically a horse race. And you're placing your bets. And so, to Scott's point, a company that is positioned to support those companies is actually in a better position, a winning proposition, because you can back multiple horses. And on top of that, let's say one of the companies does win. They get the contract, they make the boats, they make the ISR or kinetic. And when peacetime comes, that company is set up just to make those boats. And it's important to be able to change lanes or change industries in those times and be completely dual use. That's what when we talk with SOCCENT and the U.S. Navy, they're looking for companies that are going to be able to survive peacetime and don't need constant government funding to stay afloat. So, it's important to not put all your eggs in one basket and, be able to innovate beyond just military work.
I'm going to add on to that. So all Drake answers there, but we also have to look at it's not going to last if we don't develop workforce development. If we don't get more grants from federal and state to be able to get the workforce trained. We have workforces in this field dying out, moving out, retiring out at a rapid rate, but we are not training them. It takes a good amount of time to train in this field, and we're not utilizing those resources to train them in that way. So we won't be able to handle a major acquisition or purchase from the DoD if we don't have the proper and trained. You could create a prototype, but you won't have the staff to maintain that prototype and be able to manufacture that out.
Really, let's stick with that. The state's own analysis says the workforce is aging out before it can transfer the knowledge. What's the timeline? When does this thing actually break? I'm sorry, y'all. I have to ask uncomfortable questions.
Yeah, that is an uncomfortable one. And actually, we're in the breaking season now. And I'm sure anytime I take a visit at the manufacturers, including Hattie when I was there, getting experienced and trained individuals, welders, quality technicians, engineers, were there already. The stress is there. We're not able to keep up. The manufacturers are not able to keep up. Department of Defense is not able to keep up because we don't have those trained professionals that are needed, and the pay isn't there to be able to continue them or encourage them to go on. And even the small sorry, I say manufacturers because that's the world I'm in, but manufacturers, the technology techs, Department of Defense, we just can't keep up because we're not getting the grants. And these smaller techs, businesses cannot keep up because they cannot afford all the training that requires it. So we're in that breaking season, and it's coming a lot faster. And I would say within 2 years, we are going to be at a halt with being able to keep up with these demands. And that alone is going to create the Department of Defense to go other measures.
It's one of the biggest things I realized the Department of Defense used to do is, and they need to bring this back, was they had a program where as long as you committed to working with the Department of Defense for 3 years, they paid for your education. And then after they paid for your education and you stayed with them for 3 years, they automatically gave you a 5-year contract. With that 5-year contract, they gave you a sign-in bonus. They killed all that stuff right along. And somebody asked the question earlier for 8A. It's the number 8, the letter A. So that's the 8A program. But Michael, as a CFA, you left the big maritime operator to build your float launch pad and to build what you're building. I want to know one thing before we move on. What's one thing you believe that the market doesn't? What's actually about to happen?
I think it's changing. I mean, when we started the company, there was this assumption that SpaceX was going to take everybody to space, and all the millions and millions, billions, really, dollars that are being put into companies that are developing next generation systems that'll be in orbit or even in a cislunar environment. They had it right. Launch is soft. We heard that from folks in the industry. We're sitting there looking at the aggregate ability of our spaceports to provide the launch cadence that SpaceX alone is saying that they're going to reach. And okay, it doesn't seem like it's solved from our perspective. But now we're actually hearing that SpaceX is going to strand a lot of the industry by only providing launch capability for their hardware. They want to put SpaceX data centers into space. They don't want to take your data center. They don't want to take your next generation.
But imagine that Elon Musk is being selfish. I never saw that one.
Surprise, surprise, people are, trying to get advantage in business, right? And so I think what we're now hearing, and I was just out in El Segundo, California about a week ago, and there are folks who are developing startups that are going to put novel spacecraft into orbit are saying, well, I'm looking at relativity. Well, I'm looking at these other launch companies that, haven't launched yet in many cases and don't have necessarily the capability to develop facilities at the time that the market will need and demand. So I think like what we're seeing right now is launch is still a capacity crunch, even in this country. And we have advantages over other nations where there just isn't the launch heritage that we have. And, when I first started hearing that SpaceX was going to make that decision, it was coming from people who had some skin in the game. Maybe they had a launch company of their own. But now I'm hearing it from investors. I'm hearing from companies that are trying to engage with SpaceX. So the U.S. government that has put a lot of money into SpaceX to develop a capability that it now seems like is not going to be as readily available as the market may have thought at the time.
So I was going to go with the vacancy problem because we have a silly height problem. And for you guys, and I know some of the jargon, so if some of the jargon, I just want to make sure primes are just primarily on contract, subs or subcontractors. Just want to make sure. I always hate to assume that people know what's being said when people use jargon because there was a point in my life I had no idea what people were talking about. And subs mean something very different in different worlds. So let your mind go where it goes. But the capital is booming and almost none of it is coming here. So I just want to know, Scott, you're a venture partner at Stony Walsum. Are you still doing that right now? Okay. And so you got dual use companies for a national defense agenda of $14.6 billion in 5 months. And the deal, kind of barely moved or went through. Congratulations. But when you look at 727 companies, what disqualifies them in the first 10 minutes? And is it the company or is it the region?
It's not the region. It almost always is the company. Well, investing, and particularly as at early stage levels, is a fun mess to get into. I've sat on both sides of the table over my career, and it can be a lot of fun on either side depending on how the conversations goes. But the thing that you see consistently where no money gets invested in a company is generally because the folks asking for money very often have technical background. They're engineers, through and through. And they just built the most beautiful thing in the world. And if you don't believe it, just ask them. But they can't connect it to anything. You should invest in my company because the customers will just love what I have. And then you probe a little bit on and what kind of customer is that and what is it that you're going to do for them and their shareholders. And very often you just can't get a good answer. That in a nutshell is the one single biggest problem is very, very smart inventors that have a great solution, maybe unique in the planet, but so what? And sometimes it's timing. Sometimes it's lack of imagination. There are lots of things that go into it.
Or sometimes it's a lack of social skills. I actually know how your product is going to connect with the world. But
That is true.
I think we missed part of that. I don't know if you guys heard me because I actually stumbled over the number. Just to make sure that you were paying attention earlier. How much money did I say that the Tampa Bay region raised the first half of 2026?
$300 million.
Did y'all hear how much he raised in 5 months? Say that one more time. $14.6 billion. Think about that now. Now, the other thing is, why is that number not being captured? So I'm going to have to ask you, Mr. Pickens, how much of that money actually came to Tampa Bay, and why don't we have that count? with the money actually coming here. Out of that 14.6 billion, how much of that came to Tampa Bay or St. Pete?
This guy, you have 14 million.
14.6?
No, first of all, that number is not correct. It's much smaller than that.
What's the number?
I'm not sure exactly. I think there's decimal point. Okay, off there. But your larger point is fair. What of the money that is being raised for this entire industry, how much of it is coming to this area, and why or why not? We look at that and we've said, that this is it's a competitive situation. First of all, we're not competing with Tampa. From the government's perspective, we and Tampa are the same place.
Hold on, I want you to say that again because we got to stop this divide of the bridge.
Absolutely.
Because when people think about money in Miami, Miami is everything from Key West up to Port St. Lucie. Not to go West Palm Beach. Miami is Key West to Port St. Lucie. So if you think money is a difference between which side of this bridge you live on, I know the first thing you don't know is how money operates. So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. So first of all, we are competing at a national level. There are all kinds of places just like us at exactly the same stage with, a whole bunch of very smart, very interesting companies that are trying to get traction. So yeah, it's a lot of money that's out there, but we are competing. When you're competing, I mean, it's just like selling anything else. We have to market. Here in the discussion from the previous session, I mean, you guys were all over that. It is absolutely a fact when we talk to people and investors all over the country, and they go, where? And they go, why? And where does our advertising money as an area get spent? George, the beach, right? So we have an inertia problem. Our past is impinging on our future here, and we've got to work collectively to change that. But there is money that's going to be coming here. Let me share one quick anecdote. Our organization was selected to work with the state of Florida, particularly Secretary of Commerce Alex Kelly, his organization, to do a study in Florida to try to identify opportunity zones that then could be clustered to create maritime prosperity zones. You guys heard of maritime prosperity zones at all? That's a big deal because that's what's going to help get money here. Maritime prosperity zone is a new invention by the Department of War, particularly the Navy. And the whole point is investors will get tax advantages if they invest in a company in a particular geography. So the state of Florida asked us to do a study of the state of Florida and figure out, which places would we advise the Department of War to put money. And the reason that we were selected to do that is we have a long history of doing this all over the world, as a matter of fact. And we look at things like what assets are there, what's the workforce there now, what's the potential for the workforce because of the surrounding academic community at all levels, from trade school all the way up. What are the things that we even look at things like if you could attract workforce to the area, where would those workers live? Would they be able to afford to live? Could you attract the base?
Goes back to almost everything we were talking about with the actual ecosystem itself and just the economy. So it's
Exactly. So we did this big analysis, and as you looked around the state of Florida, different areas kind of lit up. You know what lit up as number one opportunity to invest money in defense tech in the state of Florida? Pinellas County. Number one in Florida when we considered like 100 different factors. And this is a pretty rigorous scientific analysis, was done in conjunction with USF. But so we have a lot to work with. We just have to get better at marketing.
understood. So we definitely have a storytelling issue. We need a whole different newsroom that focuses on nothing but innovation and tech in our community. We're missing that right now. And even though we do know that we have a podcast studio, but innovation that's doing it, we need TV, we need visuals as well. Michael, one of the things you kind of mentioned that Bezos must back companies, they're not really that's not your customer. That's not what you're looking at. But as a market, or at least with market capital, what are you targeting right now in this region that would attract the VCs to you?
I mean, our motto from an operating perspective is kind of half boat, half platform will travel. So we're not necessarily targeting companies in this region unilaterally. We have government interest in launching in both the Pacific and the Atlantic. Our beachhead is very defense oriented, and then there's a need to launch from some of those offshore points of origin for ongoing Golden Dome initiatives. And not just a need, but a real like burning sense of urgency. So I think that's what gets us to the point where we've done some of our first launches, and then can think about from a commercial perspective and an access to space perspective what locations make sense. I do, so just clarity there. I think we're not necessarily targeting this region with our go to market. I do think that there's interest in developing a Gulf-based range. We do have commercial partners who have signed MOUs with us expressing that interest. And I think that there's interest within the state of Florida, given all of the riches that we have today with our launch infrastructure, supporting both defense and commercial launches, in being a part of that potential opportunity in order to keep the space industry and the launch activity here in the state, even if it's on the other side of the state or a different part of the state from where it happens today. So, how does that translate to VC interest? I think VCs certainly look at how are you de-risking from a technical perspective? And so we've done that with our engineering team, with third-party technical validation from American Bureau of Shipping and other groups. But they also look at how are you de-risking from a revenue perspective, right? How are you securing a pipeline of revenue that's eventually going to make it so you don't have to keep coming back to them for checks. And so what we've done in that regard is multifold. We've entered directly into agreements with commercial launch companies that are looking for places to launch and or have a beat on some of these initial government launch opportunities that will require you to launch offshore. And we've entered into long-term contractual relationships. The maritime parlance is a charter arrangement with those companies. So effectively what we're doing is taking us from how many launches per year do you have, to how many years have you contracted the use of what's really kind of a piece of heavy industrial equipment when it comes to our platform. So I think the kind of geographical focus is, maybe of interest to some of our local investors. Could be launched from this area. Could we bring some of the economic development that would come from having a launch location in the Gulf, staging out of Tampa or Manatee or St. Pete. But I think in general, the VC interest is very much how are you finding those pockets of commitments that are going to de-risk you from a revenue perspective.
Seems like the study says your VCs have interest of doing it in Pinellas County, but it seems like there seems to be a gap. Am I the only one that caught that? Like there seems to be a gap versus what the study just said versus what the VCs are kind of pointing themselves to. But before I come to Rolly and we start talking about the actual people that it's going to take to make this happen, uh, quick question for Hattie. I'm sorry. Quick question for you, Justin. Justin, right? Okay. Justin, I know defense procurement kind of rewards, quality suppliers, not just the fast ones, but your company is built on sand. So with the Department of Defense, what is the main thing you've learned about the timeline in this role that people should understand? Because I know you guys are hearing money, so I want to slow everybody down. What should they understand about the timeline and the life cycles of these contracts before anybody decides? Yeah, exactly. Before anybody decides they want to start working with DoD.
Oh man, strap in, because when it comes to these government contracts, it could take years, and we're working with um government organizations to bring the speed that startups have and bring it into this fragmented, siloed system that government procurement is right now. It's interesting because we sell picks and shovels. In this gold rush of US beats and these defense contracts, we want to sell the hulls. We want to sell the boats to all of the companies that are going after them. What's interesting is that the pockets of gold are all siloed from each other. So the United States Navy might be working on a project that's super similar to a project that the Marine Corps is working on, and they know nothing in between. And part of it's maybe ego, others is just a fragmented system.
Oh no, I love analogies. That was so good. You did a great job. There. Keep going.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we want to really help the system come together and become a web of understanding what technology is out there. A lot of companies, and it goes into the employment. Let's say the U.S. government needs 10,000 boats to run autonomous missions, whether it's ISR or kinetic, and they need those boats made. You're going to need a workforce of at least 1,000 people with molds that take 6+ months, and that buildup of the workforce, you're going to have to find the people that are willing to do that. You're going to have to pay them to do that in an industry that is very old and has aged out mostly. And on top of that, the government knows this, so they have these contracts staged so that it takes, okay, here's 6 months to stage 1. Then they wean it down to, like, say, 7 companies, stage 2. And then those 7 companies are usually the primes, your Lockheed Martins, your HIIs, your Andurils. And it then becomes a lot political. It becomes a competition of who can promise more for less with no real plan to back it up. And that's what the bureaucracy and these promises slow the system down to where for example, China right now produces over 350 boats to our 1. Just let that sink in.
You could have just went with the other example. You should have talked about how long it took the government just to get from Windows 98 to Office 365. Exactly. That was a challenge within itself. I remember when it was going through that. So it's the production time. It's not just bad, it's horrible. Oh, it's horrible. So, but that goes, and I'm glad you brought it up because you actually said something that I wanted to go ahead and tag into with Ruli. I wanted you to address this. Everyone on this stage right now is chasing capital. You're the one person on this stage, you're chasing people. So if the region got $100 million tomorrow for defense manufacturing, how much of that could actually be absorbed in the next 24 months? And what happens to the rest? Do we actually have the workforce to execute 100? Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Go ahead.
No, we don't. We don't. And the problem is, and you can fact check me, but about 80% of this type of workforce, manufacturing, in boats across the board, manufacturing, about 80% of this area's employers have about 50 and under employees. So if you think if you get that big contract, where are you gonna find the people? Where are you gonna find the trained people? And with that small of a organization, you're not gonna have the funds to train the people 6 months in a year, like you just said, it's staged. They take a process, but that means while you're going through the stages, you need to be training your people and you need to be advertising and sending them to programs, which cost money. Well, if you're a smaller organization and you haven't landed that contract yet, you're not going to have the funds to do so. So when they drop that 100 million, billion, you better already have the people in place to be able to produce at the speed to which they want to produce it. And being a wartime veteran, I could tell you, we just don't leave the marker because when they expect it, they want it when they want it. And so that is, really where it comes to is just not having the funds, which is why it's so important for your local municipalities and your federals and your states to provide grants so you can get that training and those small organizations can compete with those bigger cupcakes.
Really, I want to just make sure I'm right, just so people understand it. You guys haven't learned what I'm trying to get here. We actually have a crisis.
We do.
This is an economic crisis for Pinellas County. Florida reported 427,000 job openings in December 2025. The unemployment rate was only 4.7. Workforce leaders describe the core problem as the skill gap between open job and the available talent pool. We spend all of our money in actually what is still actually a declining economy, which is actually going into tourism. A lot of people are still coming to Florida. People aren't staying in hotels. They're not spending as much money. You now have a generation that doesn't drink as much, so the restaurants aren't making the profit they used to make. But we have all these jobs and all these opportunities open with $100,000 careers, and we literally cannot fill the jobs. But the world doesn't stop. So if we don't start figuring out this problem, people are going to move on. these contracts have to go somewhere else. They'll build in other states. They'll figure out a way to make it happen. So before I pass it back off to you, really, I just want everybody to know from the specific trade in this region, what gap is the worst? What actual is it just the manufacturing? Is it also the engineers? What is the hardest gap that we have? And if we don't fix this by 2028, what happens then?
It is definitely more so the manufacturers because the engineers are coming out. They're coming out with the AI, the automation, which is helping them advance. The younger generation, not to pick out any whichever, but the younger generation is coming out and they're whipping it in and they're blowing us out of the water. But our 60-year-old tool and die maker, our mold makers, and I live this world, so that's why I'm talking a little frankly, but um, they can't keep up and they're just wanting to go home. They have done their share, they've worked, they want to go home. They're not able to keep up with the engineers prototyping and coming out with the 3D printing and then being able to produce that or learn how to do it or create the molds to produce in mass. And so like he says, we're in a deep crisis, and it is more in the manufacturing side because the engineers are coming out brilliant and creative and are ready to go and they're ready to show what they have. But unfortunately, on the other side of that are the ones that have to support that. They're actually on their way out, and there's a major gap.
So I got two quick questions for Michael and Scott. So, but first I'm gonna roll with Michael. Cut and steel is 30 to 45 days. That requires welders, fitters, and marine fabricators to available on short notice. Do you find that crew here? Do you have a bench ready for that platform, or do you have to recruit those kind of things in?
I mean, our strategy is we partner with the manufacturers that already exist in the region, right? And um, I actually have a slightly different perspective and experience where I think that we have a lot of the bones of the industrial base, that maybe was more active in the 90s. It just needs to be dusted off and put to work in many cases. When I talk to shipyards, there are instances where, there's kind of like acute supply demand gaps where, okay, maybe they have a workforce in this area, they need to get to this area. Right. But in aggregate, I've not have a shipyard tell me, hey, we can't do this job. We don't have the aggregate capacity to do this job. They may tell me, hey, you want it done in this timeline. It's going to cost you 20% more. Right. But they are always very keen to win the work. And I think what we're lacking, in my view, from a maritime industrial base perspective, specifically, is the ability to develop novel maritime systems that are competitive on the global scale that then allow you to not just put a single ship or a 2-ship order in, but put a 15-ship order in, because that's where a manufacturer can commit to providing not just an expensive one-off product on a short term, but a cost-effective program to build an array of assets on a repeat basis. And so I think what we're lacking is like this ability to innovate within not the manufacturing side per se, but the design. Now, maybe once we get to that scale, that's where we start running into more workforce challenges. But at least for me, we're a startup, right? We're not somebody that, at least in the context of our company, shipyards have been working with for decades, but they're always very willing to serve. And, when we put some funding down for our prototype from Space Florida, they did that job on budget and under time. So, I mean, from my perspective, at least, you kind of got to figure out how to navigate the waters, how to dust off the industrial base that's there. I'm sure there's improvements to be made. But for me, the challenge is actually on the demand side. Do we have enough innovators that can develop systems that are scalable and competitive on the global basis and can ultimately be, not just serve one-off trades in the U.S., but help us start to export some of our maritime industrial output?
So I think since we have kind of not opposing, we have different views. I want to pass this off to Scott. Then Scott, you'll have to be the new moderator for this bunch. So do we actually have a lack of qualified options coming here, or do we have a lack of qualified suppliers and qualified workforce? Because we're seeing the scales kind of tip with that conversation. And it might be because one's a startup and we're looking at more of the larger industries and the larger companies, but which way is this actually leaning in your opinion?
The reason this is confusing is because it is. This is not a simple problem. Uh, a lot of research has been done on the manufacturing workforce, particularly as it relates to maritime, but defense tech in general. Um, and uh, the the best thinking that we at DIBI believe, the Defense Industrial Base at C2, is that the conversation started about a decade ago, um, with looking at the basic numbers, and we basically said, I, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here. I'm a submarine guy. I'm a nuclear engineer. I drove submarines around the world. I tell my students we won the Cold War. Uh,
Are you still teaching at Eckerd?
and I'm still teaching the Decker.
Okay.
And my students say, the what? So that's a problem. That aside, the the real point is that the need for the workforce is evolving. What we thought the need was 10 years ago is not the need that we have. There is still certainly need for all the traditional skill sets. There are still many ships, etc., that are going to be built out of steel, that are going to require welds, that are going to require all the electronics, that they would have had 10 years ago. You got to remember that a number one strategic weapon that is now being built by the United States, number one by far in terms of all priority funding, etc., is one submarine, Columbia-class submarine, very first one of the USS Columbia, Thunder of Wonders. It's the first of a new class. It's going to replace the Ohio-class nuclear boats, which have been the key part of the nuclear triad for the last 4 years. So 10 years ago, when that was, pretty well through design already 10 years ago, we still haven't launched it. It's about 2.5 years behind schedule for all the reasons we talked about. But so that was the atmosphere. That was the need at the time that we first started talking about, well, what about the workforce? Because eventually we're going to need 30 or 40 of these things. Not to mention the 100 fast attack boats that we need at the same time. So my only point is that over time, the technology has advanced, and companies like Hattie and Seagate, they're coming into the picture now. They're not necessarily going to need all of those same, I'll call it old, skill sets. Again, many of those old skill sets are still going to be absolutely required, and we have to figure out how to fill that gap. That is a real gap. But on the other hand, the jobs, the skills that are going to be needed are evolving. They're different. And that's what we have to keep up with. That's where we need the whole educational system itself and all the funding mechanisms for all of the educational systems to catch up.
So Scott, we have
Real Jack, I just want to, I think that's a perfect example, right? You've got this hypothetical program that is going to cause a need for, thousands or how many jobs that we don't have. The challenge is actually furthering that program. Okay, there may be a workforce shortage if and when that program comes to fruition. Hopefully it does soon. But I think the point I'm making is like getting to the point where we're actually ready to go and build is a challenge that I think continues to vex us on the maritime side.
Yeah, no. And, I think that Hattie really has ventured into that gap right there. That's my job. I go to boat builders who are looking to increase their production. It takes time and it takes money and resources. And I say, hey, give me your file of your boat. We then print it all in one shot. Your hull, your stringers, your bulkheads, your storage boxes where you're mounting your electronics, the top deck, it's all printed in one shot at a 45-degree angle. And so in 2 days, I can have a boat ready. We have 8 robots in downtown St. Pete. That makes us the world's largest large-scale additive company by capacity. And we're able to produce up to 600 boats a year right now. And so when you get those programs that are spooling up, like the lengthy government contracts that I was mentioning, we're there to step into that gap and so that you can produce from day one. And so that we don't want to take away from the traditional manufacturing jobs. We need master welders. We need master fiberglass engineers. And at the same time, though, we also need engineers who can run our robots. We're using AI so that every time we print a table or an entertainment piece for Disney or a boat, it's learning and getting better. And we're setting up our company so that our robots can be run by someone with just a GED. But the engineering talent is still needed for slicing and getting those boats ready to go. So when it comes to the workforce, it's just identifying where those pieces are and where they need to be so the system can all work together. We fill a gap to get ready for higher expansion, because if you need 1,000 boats, Hattie is perfect. If you need 10,000 boats, you're gonna need extra capacity, and so that's where you get the Rosita Riveter, and you bring in everyone. But we can fill that gap while the workforce, yeah, exactly.
Well, before we close it out, just want to get a chance to, or really, if you could, I'm gonna make you answer the hard question. Yeah, I know. The referendum is in 15 weeks. If it fails in November, tell me what we actually lose, not the setback. What company leaves if that referendum fails? Right. I'll say it into the mic because they need to hear that. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
all of them, and jobs and the chances for more grants to train. It goes on and on. It's a ripple. It's a domino effect.
So you guys got to remember that. So when you start looking at stuff, one border, two different industries. So you're either going to be paying attention to the super yacht marina that's being built, or people are just going to park their boats, or you support the people that are actually building the boats. So just remember what you're actually paying attention to with this ecosystem. So I think we want to get them into the lightning round. I want to get some feedback. But before we go, please give our panelists a round of applause and thank you so much for your time. I know it's been critical in our conversation to have, but we want you all to be aware. And the whole point of having these kind of conversations and bringing up stuff like manufacturing day is, sometimes we come to things like this and we look around the room and it's like, more people should be here. And I used to believe in that when I was in my 20s doing events. Then I started realizing the people that care and the people that are going to make the change are the ones that actually show up in the room. So it's up to you to take this information and get this information to the next person. It's up to you all to show up. I don't care if 50, 200, 2,000 people show up, because only 12 to 20 people is going to actually get together, correlate, and make something to make a difference. So make sure you do the uncomfortable thing. And I'm sorry I didn't say this earlier. The uncomfortable thing I ask everybody to do is just like working out at the gym. Lift a weight you never lift before. So that means talk to somebody today that you've never met before. Talk to somebody that you haven't talked to before. Exchange numbers, because this one little bridge, and it's like you were saying, just what I'm saying, that workforce, that one little thing, as Scott was saying, when you bring people together, as Michael was saying, we have these gaps to fulfill. All these things matter if we tie each other back together in community. So I just wanted to leave you all with that, because we have a fast transition